One bad winter could wipe out an entire farm. No insurance, no government help. Just you, your family, and whatever you'd managed to store away. This is the story of winter survival in Edwardian England. Before we start, quick thing. If these help you sleep, like or subscribe would be cool. Also, drop where you're listening from and the time. I check the comments and it's crazy seeing people from like Australia and Norway on the same video. Alright, we're heading back to Edwardian tonight. But wait, get comfortable first. Seriously, take a second, adjust those pillows, pull up that blanket. You're gonna want to be settled for this one. Now, congratulations, you just woke up in rural England, 1905. Your eyes crack open to the dim grey half-light of a winter dawn. And the first thing you notice, you can see your breath, inside, in your bedroom. The air slices into your lungs like tiny knives with each inhale. Your nose is numb. The thin woolen blanket and the patched quilt your grandmother made provide just enough warmth to keep you from freezing entirely, but every inch of exposed skin feels the bite of the cold. Not the kind of cold that makes you turn up the thermostat, the kind that makes you wonder if you'll survive until spring. You're lying on a straw-filled mattress that crackles with frost when you move. The walls of the stone cottage glisten with condensation that's frozen into delicate patterns overnight. Unlike your soft memory foam mattress right now, this bed offers no comfort, just slightly less suffering than the floor. Welcome to the Wilson family farm, a small tenant operation about 5 miles outside of Devon. The year is 1905 and King Edward VII sits on the throne. The British Empire spans the globe. Electric lights are appearing in wealthy city homes. Automobiles are starting to putter down London streets. But here, it's just you, the cold, and the desperate daily struggle to survive winter. Thomas Wilson, the man of the house, is already up, been up since 4:30. He's been out to check on the animals in the barn, his first priority every morning regardless of weather. The cows, sheep and horses generate enough body heat together to keep the barn warmer than the house, but not by much. Now he's downstairs, hunched over the kitchen range, desperately trying to coax life into the embers that were banked overnight. The fire is the heartbeat of the house. If it goes out completely, the day turns from merely brutal to potentially deadly. The rough calluses on Thomas's hands are cracked and bleeding from the cold. His knuckles look like raw meat. Unlike your moisturized hands right now, resting on warm blankets, his hands are weapons against the elements, painful, useful tools that keep working no matter what. "Sarah! Girls! Time to get up now!" he calls up the narrow staircase. His voice sounds different in winter, tighter, more clipped, as if even words need to be conserved for warmth. Sarah Wilson, his wife of 15 years, has been awake for some time, but lingering in the relative warmth of the blankets. She knows exactly what awaits her downstairs: water to fetch, bread to bake, animals to feed, children to dress, an endless cycle of work made 10 times harder by the cold. "Coming, Thomas," she calls, her voice still thick with sleep. "Mary, Emma, time to get up, girls." The 2 Wilson daughters, Mary, 12, and Emma, 9, burrow deeper under their shared blankets on the small bed across the room. The thought of leaving their cocoon of marginal warmth is almost physically painful. "Don't make me come up there," Thomas warns, but without real anger. He understands. God, does he understand? Emma peeks her head out, her brown hair wild around her face. "Is it still snowing, Mother?" Sarah crosses to the tiny window, scraping frost from the inside of the glass with her fingernail. The sound makes everyone wince. "Stopped for now," she reports, "but there's a good 8 inches on the ground." 8 inches of snow means the path to the well is buried. It means the chicken coop needs digging out. It means hauling hay to the sheep will take twice as long, trudging through drifts that soak through even the sturdiest boots. It means today will be even harder than yesterday, and yesterday nearly broke them. Come on then, Sarah says, pulling on a woolen shawl over her nightdress. Fire's got to be built up and the animals won't feed themselves. This isn't some romantic vision of ye old England. There's no charming quaintness to this brutal reality. The Wilsons aren't thinking about how picturesque their stone cottage looks with snow on the roof. They're calculating survival, how much food remains in storage, how much fuel they have for the fire, whether the weather will break before one of them falls ill. Winter on an Edwardian farm wasn't about Christmas card scenes and sleigh rides. It was about staying alive. Downstairs, Thomas has managed to revive the kitchen fire, though it's still pitifully small. The range is an old one, iron and unforgiving. Unlike your thermostat that you can tap to kick on instant heat, this fire demands constant attention, constant feeding. It's like a hungry animal living in the house, useful but dangerous. The kitchen is the only remotely warm room in the house, and even that's generous. The temperature might be just above freezing in here, while the rest of the cottage remains bitterly cold. The family will cluster in this room most of the day, venturing to other parts of the house only when absolutely necessary. Sarah descends the narrow stairs, her breath clouding before her. "Water's frozen solid again," she says, nodding toward the bucket in the corner. "Every last drop." Thomas nods grimly. It's not a surprise, but it's still a problem. No water means no tea, no washing, no cooking until they can melt snow or break the ice on the well. It's the first challenge of many today. "I'll get some snow to melt," he says, reaching for a bucket. "You get breakfast started." This is the rhythm of winter days, solving one urgent problem after another, all while the cold tries to kill you. Outside, the world is transformed. The familiar landscape of the small farm has vanished under a blanket of white. The chicken coop, the pig pen, the vegetable garden now dormant, all look different, smaller somehow under the snow. The bare branches of the apple orchard are etched black against the grey sky, each twig outlined in white. Thomas trudges through the snow, his boots crunching with each step. The physical effort of walking through deep snow warms him slightly, but the air is so cold it burns his lungs. He fills the bucket with clean snow from an untouched drift. This will melt down to just enough water for morning tea and washing faces. That's it. They'll need much more for the day's needs. Back in the kitchen, Sarah has laid the breakfast table, a few thick slices of bread from yesterday's baking, a small pot of preserved blackberry jam from last summer's harvest, and the precious last inches of cream skimmed from yesterday's milking. The jam and cream are luxuries, saved for the bitter winter days when spirits need lifting. "Girls coming down?" Thomas asks, setting the snow-filled bucket near the fire to melt. "Getting dressed," Sarah replies. "The floor's like ice up there. Emma says her shoes were frozen." Thomas grunts. Not surprising. Sometimes they'd find the girls' shoes in the morning with a layer of frost inside from the moisture of the previous day. Just another small misery of winter. The girls appear, still bleary-eyed but dressed in their winter layers, woolen stockings, flannel petticoats, sturdy dresses and knitted shawls wrapped around their shoulders. Mary's hands are red and chapped. Emma's nose is running from the cold. "Morning, father," they chorus, taking their places at the table. "Morning, girls. Sleep well?" "Yes, father." They lie in unison. Nobody slept well. The cold saw to that, with its creeping fingers finding every gap in blankets, every exposed patch of skin. Thomas looks at his family gathered around the table, illuminated by the weak winter light coming through the window and the growing glow of the fire. Despite everything, the cold, the work ahead, the constant worry, he feels a surge of love so strong it almost warms him. They're alive. They're together. They're surviving. For Edwardian farmers, that was victory enough in winter. We'll need to check the hay rick today, Thomas says, as they eat their simple breakfast. Make sure the covering held in yesterday's snow. Can't afford to lose any feed now. The hay rick was their winter insurance policy, carefully stacked and thatched hay harvested in late summer that would feed the livestock through the barren months. Without it, the animals would starve before spring grass appeared. Without the animals, the family would have no livelihood, no future. Last autumn, Thomas and his neighbour James Thatcher had spent days building the rick, using techniques passed down through generations. The hay had to be perfectly dry when stacked or it would rot. The thatched roof had to be angled just right to shed water. The whole structure needed to be raised on staddle stones to keep out rats and damp. A properly built hay rick was an art form, and it kept your animals alive. It was as simple and as critical as that. "I'll go with you, Father," Mary offers. At 12, she's already taking on important farm tasks, already seeing herself as essential to the farm's survival rather than a child. "Good girl," Thomas approves. "We'll go after I've cleared a path to the well and the privy." The outdoor privy is another winter challenge. Located about 20 yards from the back door, it's a miserable journey in deep snow and freezing temperatures. The wooden seat is like ice. The small structure offers minimal protection from the elements, and the contents can freeze solid in the coldest weather. It's an undignified, uncomfortable necessity that everyone dreads. Emma makes a face. "Can't we use the chamber pot all day?" Sarah shakes her head firmly. "And have that smell in the house all day?" "No, Emma, the privy's there for using." This is the unromantic reality of rural winter life. No indoor plumbing, no bathroom down the hall, just a freezing trek through snow to sit in an unheated wooden closet over a hole in the ground. After breakfast, the day's work begins in earnest. The rapidly melting snow in the bucket has yielded about 2 inches of water. Sarah uses some to wash the breakfast dishes and saves the rest for cooking later. They'll need much more. Thomas and Mary don their heaviest coats, wrap woolen scarves around their faces, and venture out to check the hay rick. The snow is still deep, but at least it's not actively falling. The sky above is clear blue now, deceptively cheerful for such a bitterly cold day. The hay rick stands in the field beyond the barn, a monumental rectangle of golden hay covered with a thatched roof. It looks almost like a small cottage itself, a golden refuge in the white landscape. Thomas circles it slowly, examining every side for signs of damage or water penetration. "Looks sound," he pronounces finally, relief evident in his voice. Thatch held up well. Hay's still dry inside. Mary nods, understanding the significance. Dry hay meant living animals. Living animals meant surviving until spring. Meanwhile, back at the cottage, Sarah and Emma have their own battle with winter to fight. The wooden water pump at the well has frozen solid overnight. Sarah pours a small amount of their precious melted snow water over the pump mechanism, then waits for it to penetrate the ice. After 3 attempts, the pump finally yields with a groan, producing a trickle of icy water. "Quick, Emma," Sarah urges, holding a bucket under the spout. Before it freezes again, Emma pumps the handle vigorously, her small body throwing its entire weight into each downstroke. Water gushes into the bucket, life-giving necessary water that they absolutely cannot live without. When the bucket is full, Sarah immediately starts filling a second one. They'll need at least 5 buckets to get through the day for cooking, minimal washing, and drinking. Hauling full water buckets through snow is back-breaking work. Emma can manage only a half-filled bucket, the water sloshing and freezing almost instantly where it spills on her mittens. Sarah carries a full bucket in each hand, the wire handles cutting into her palms, even through woolen mittens. By the time they've stored enough water indoors, both are sweating despite the cold, and sweat in winter is dangerous. It freezes quickly against the skin, causing painful chapping and risking frostbite. Inside the cottage, Sarah immediately hangs a large pot of water over the fire to heat. Warm water is a luxury in winter, but necessary for certain tasks. She'll use some to mix with cold water for washing clothes, some for washing bodies, and some for the hot water bottles they'll place in the beds tonight. In another pot, she starts the day's main meal, a thick stew that will simmer for hours, providing both food and additional heat in the kitchen. Into the pot goes a chunk of salt pork from their autumn butchering, onions and carrots from the root cellar, and dried herbs from bundles hanging from the kitchen ceiling. The vegetables are slightly soft, the last of the stored harvest starting to fade, but still edible. It's February now, the hungry month. The stored food from autumn is dwindling, but spring's fresh growth is still far away. This is when Edwardian farm families felt the pinch most acutely, when they might have to slaughter an animal they'd planned to keep, when they counted potatoes and rationed flour with increasing concern. Outside, Thomas has moved on to the barn, where the real wealth of the farm shelters from winter. 2 dairy cows, a draft horse, 4 sheep and a half-dozen chickens. A modest herd by some standards, but it represents everything for the Wilson family. The animals need tending multiple times daily, no matter how bitter the weather. The barn is warmer than outside, but still well below freezing. The animal's breath forms clouds in the air. Thomas forks fresh hay to the livestock, checks that their water hasn't frozen completely, and examines each animal for signs of distress or illness. Winter is when livestock are most vulnerable, to cold, to disease, to starvation if feed runs short. "Good girl, Daisy," he murmurs to the older cow as he runs his hands over her sides, checking her condition. "Spring grass isn't far now." It's a lie, and they both know it. Spring is still many bitter weeks away, but sometimes lies help you survive winter too. Mary has gone to check the chicken coop, gathering the few precious eggs the hens still produce in winter. With shorter daylight hours and cold temperatures, egg production drops dramatically. Each egg is a small victory, a concentrated package of nutrition that might make the difference in keeping everyone healthy until spring. As morning stretches toward noon, the winter sun climbs higher, but provides little warmth. Inside the cottage, the fire has finally heated the kitchen to what might generously be called comfortable, perhaps 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Sarah has set bread dough to rise in a bowl near the fire, covered with a damp cloth to keep it from drying out. Baking bread will further warm the kitchen later. Emma sits at the table, laboriously practicing her letters in a copybook. The Wilsons believe in education, even for girls. Even when there's farm work to be done, Emma will attend the village school when weather permits, which isn't today. The snow is too deep, the mile-long walk too treacherous. "Mother," Emma says suddenly, looking up from her work, "I think the chimney's smoking wrong." Sarah turns from the stove, frowning. The child is right. Smoke is beginning to back up into the room rather than rising properly up the chimney. Grey tendrils curl out around the stovepipe, bringing with them the acrid smell of burning wood. "Oh no," Sarah breathes. "Not today. Please not today." A blocked chimney in winter is more than an inconvenience. It's a potential disaster. Without the fire, the cottage would quickly become uninhabitable in these temperatures, and right now, with Thomas and Mary still outside tending to animals, Sarah is facing this crisis alone. She throws open the back door, letting in a blast of frigid air. "Thomas!" she calls, her voice carrying across the snow-covered yard. "Chimney's backing up!" Thomas appears from the barn, instantly understanding the urgency. A blocked chimney is a problem that must be addressed immediately, no matter what else needs doing. He hurries toward the cottage, mentally reviewing the chimney cleaning tools they have on hand. The Wilson family's day, already challenging, has just become significantly worse, but this is winter on an Edwardian farm, a constant battle against elements that show no mercy, problems that can't wait until conditions improve, and the ever-present knowledge that your survival depends entirely on your own resourcefulness and determination. As the smoke continues to curl into the kitchen, Emma coughs, covering her mouth with her sleeve. Sarah ties a scarf around the lower half of her face and stirs the stew one last time before moving the pot away from the hottest part of the fire. They need to reduce the fire temporarily while addressing the chimney, but can't let it go out completely. Relighting a fully extinguished fire would waste precious fuel and time they cannot afford. Thomas bursts through the door, bringing a swirl of snowflakes with him. "How bad?" he asks immediately, assessing the smoke in the kitchen. "Getting worse," Sarah replies, her voice muffled by the scarf. "Started about 10 minutes ago." Thomas nods grimly. "I'll need to clear it from the roof." This is potentially dangerous work, climbing onto a snow-covered roof in freezing temperatures to clean a chimney, but there's no alternative. No chimney sweep will come to a remote farm in these conditions. Like most problems on an Edwardian farm, they must solve this themselves, or suffer the consequences. "I'll get the holly brush," Mary says, already moving toward the storage shed where chimney cleaning tools are kept. The holly brush is exactly what it sounds like, a bundle of holly branches tied together to form a stiff, scratchy brush that can be lowered down the chimney to scrape away soot and debris. Holly was perfect for this job, as its stiff, spiky leaves would scrape the creosote from the chimney walls. Some farms used live chickens for this job, lowering the panicked birds down the chimney so their flapping wings and scratching feet would clean the surfaces, but the Wilsons considered that method unnecessarily cruel. Thomas retrieves the ladder from the barn while Mary returns with the holly brush and a coil of rope. The smoke in the kitchen is thickening despite the open door letting in freezing air. Emma's coughing has worsened. "Take her to the barn," Thomas tells Sarah. "It's smoky but warmer than outside. We'll sort this." Sarah nods, wrapping Emma in her thickest shawl and hurrying her across the yard to the relative shelter of the barn. The dairy cows look up with mild interest as the humans invade their space, then return to methodically chewing their hay. Outside, Thomas positions the ladder against the cottage wall, careful to find stable ground beneath the snow. Mary holds the ladder steady as her father climbs, the holly brush and rope slung over his shoulder. The roof is slick with snow and ice, requiring careful navigation to reach the chimney without falling. At the chimney, Thomas peers down into the sooty darkness. Something is blocking the flue about halfway down, probably a bird's nest or perhaps a build-up of creosote that finally became too thick for smoke to pass. He ties the rope securely to the holly brush, then begins lowering it into the chimney. "Ready below?" he calls down to Mary. "Ready, father," she confirms, positioning herself at the kitchen fireplace where she can guide the brush if needed. Thomas works the holly brush up and down, scraping the chimney walls methodically. Black soot and debris rain down into the fireplace, confirming his suspicion that a serious blockage had formed. After about 15 minutes of vigorous scraping, he feels the brush break through something solid, the main blockage giving way. "It's clear," Mary calls up. "Smoke's flowing properly again." Thomas continues cleaning for another 10 minutes to ensure the chimney is thoroughly cleared, then carefully makes his way back down the ladder. His face and hands are streaked with soot, his clothing dusted with black particles. It's filthy work, but essential. In the barn, Sarah has been telling Emma stories to distract her from the cold and worry. The girl's cough has subsided in the cleaner air. When they see Thomas approaching, his cleaning task apparently complete, both feel a surge of relief. "All fixed?" Sarah asks. Thomas nods, brushing ineffectually at the soot on his jacket. Bird's nest and a lot of creosote build up. Should draw properly now. This is what winter survival looked like for Edwardian farmers, not grand heroics, but constant vigilance and immediate response to problems that could quickly become life-threatening. A blocked chimney meant no heat. No heat in February could mean illness or worse. There was no margin for procrastination, no luxury of waiting for better conditions. The family returns to the cottage, where the air is already clearing as smoke finds its proper path up the chimney rather than into the living space. Thomas builds the fire back up while Sarah returns the stew pot to its place and puts the kettle on for tea. The crisis has been averted, but it's just one of many they'll face before winter releases its grip. As they warm themselves by the restored fire, none of them know that an even greater challenge awaits tomorrow. But that's winter on an Edwardian farm. Each day brings its own battles, its own tests of resilience and resourcefulness. Their survival depends on facing each one with determination and the accumulated wisdom of generations who have weathered similar winters before them. Outside, the sun has already begun its early descent toward the horizon. Winter days are short, the darkness long. Soon they'll need to light the precious oil lamps, using as few as possible to conserve fuel. The animals will need a final check before nightfall. Water will need to be heated for hot water bottles, and tomorrow's bread must be set to rise overnight. The work never stops. The cold never relents, but they endure. And as you lie there in your comfortable, warm bed, remember the hardiness that got them through those brutal Edwardian winters still lives somewhere in all of us. A resilience born of necessity, a determination that refuses to yield to the elements. Perhaps that's why these stories of winter survival resonate so deeply. They remind us of a strength we hope we'd find if ever we needed it. The fire crackles in the Wilson cottage as the family gathers close to its precious warmth. Outside, the winter night descends, stars appearing in a clear sky that promises even colder temperatures by morning. But for now, they are warm. For now, they are together. The morning after the chimney crisis dawns even colder. The Wilson family wakes to find ice patterns growing on the inside of the windows like strange crystalline ferns. The water bucket in the kitchen has a solid inch of ice on top. Even the air itself seems frozen, hanging heavy and still throughout the cottage. Thomas breaks the ice in the bucket with a poker, the crack echoing in the quiet kitchen. "Coldest night yet," he says, his voice rough from sleep. February's showing its teeth. Sarah, already stoking the kitchen fire, just nods. There's no point discussing the obvious. The cold is a presence, almost a family member in these winter months. Unwelcome, but impossible to ignore. "We'll need to check the meat today," she says instead, practical as always. "Make sure nothing's spoiling." This is the true terror of winter for Edwardian farmers, not just the cold itself, but the constant battle to preserve enough food to survive until spring. The modern luxury of refrigeration didn't exist. Your supermarket was whatever you'd managed to grow, butcher, and preserve the previous year. Running out meant hunger at best, starvation at worst. "I'll help," Mary offers, wrapping her shawl tighter. At 12, she understands the gravity of food preservation. She's seen bad winters before, years when spring found neighbour families gaunt and hollow-eyed from months of short rations. After a breakfast of porridge made from their precious oat stores, thickened with the last of yesterday's milk, Thomas and Mary bundle up to venture into the cold store, a small stone outbuilding on the north side of the cottage where winter temperatures keep food naturally chilled. It's not quite freezing inside, which is ideal. Too warm and food spoils, too cold and it freezes solid, becoming difficult to use. God, that's bloody awful, Thomas mutters as they step outside into the biting wind. He rarely swears in front of his daughters, but the shock of the cold sometimes loosens his tongue. Mary pretends not to hear, secretly pleased to be treated like an adult. The cold store sits partially underground, its stone walls providing insulation. Thomas pulls open the heavy wooden door, releasing a cloud of cool, food-scented air. Inside, the family's winter larder is laid out with methodical precision, the accumulated result of an entire year's planning and labour. Hanging from hooks in the ceiling are the most precious proteins, sides of bacon, hams, and a half-dozen pheasants Thomas snared, legally or not, in early winter. The bacon and hams have been smoked and salt-cured, transforming fresh pork into meat that can last months without spoiling. The birds are simply hung, the cold keeping them fresh until needed. Check the pheasants first, Thomas instructs, lifting a lantern to illuminate the hanging birds. They'll go bad before the cured stuff. Mary carefully inspects each bird, looking for signs of spoilage or pest damage. The birds are stiff with cold, their once bright plumage dulled in death, but the meat itself looks sound. No discoloration, no off-smell, no signs of mice having gotten to them. On wooden shelves built into the walls sit crocks and jars of preserved vegetables and fruits, the critical vitamins that will prevent scurvy and other deficiency diseases during the meatier winter diet. Pickled onions, preserved beetroot, canned tomatoes from the garden, jams and jellies made with summer fruits, all secured beneath layers of wax or cloth. Sarah's pride is here too, her brined beef packed in salt and spices, her potted meats sealed with a layer of fat, and her sausages heavily spiced and preserved in their own fat. Winter food preservation wasn't just about keeping things from rotting. It was a culinary art born of necessity, creating flavours that could brighten the darkest days. Mother wants to use one of the preserved beef tongues for dinner, Mary says, locating the crock where the brined organ meats are stored. Thomas nods approvingly. Good choice. Warming food for a cold day. What he doesn't say is that tongue will feed the family for several meals when sliced thin. Economy is always on an Edwardian farmer's mind. Nothing is wasted. Nothing can be. Mary selects a preserved tongue from the crock, wrapped in cloth and heavily salted. It's firm to the touch, properly cured. She places it in her basket, along with a jar of pickled onions and another of preserved damsons, small sour plums that Sarah transforms into a sweet tart sauce that makes even the plainest meat feel luxurious. "What about the potatoes?" Thomas asks, moving toward the root bins. The root cellar section of the cold store holds the most basic winter staples: potatoes, carrots, turnips and onions laid in sand or straw to prevent freezing or sprouting. These humble vegetables form the foundation of almost every winter meal, providing essential bulk and nutrition. Mary kneels beside the potato bin, digging through to check for any that might be turning soft or sprouting early. She pulls out a few suspicious ones, setting them aside. "These need using soon," she says, starting to get eyes. Thomas nods. We'll have potato pie tonight with the tongue. They work methodically through the cold store, checking each food type, making mental calculations about what needs eating first, what will keep longer, how long their supplies must stretch. This isn't casual meal planning, it's survival strategy. Every decision balances immediate needs against future uncertainties. Back in the kitchen, Sarah examines their selections with a practiced eye. The beef tongue will need soaking to remove excess salt, then long, slow cooking to transform the tough muscle into something tender. She sets it in a bowl of cold water to begin the process. "How's our flour holding?" Thomas asks, warming his hands by the fire. 4 sacks left, Sarah replies without having to check. She knows exactly how much remains of every essential supply. Should see us through if we're careful. Flour is life in winter, the foundation of bread, pies, puddings and dumplings that stretch more expensive ingredients. Running out would be catastrophic. Many Edwardian farm families literally measured their winter security in flour sacks. "Mother, can I help with the tongue?" Mary asks, already rolling up her sleeves. "Start the vegetables," Sarah directs. "Remember how I showed you to save the peels?" Nothing is wasted in an Edwardian farm kitchen, not even potato peels, which will be dried and added to the fire for fuel or fed to the pigs if they're clean enough, carrot tops, turnip greens, even onion skins, all have uses, in soups, as animal feed, or as dyes for cloth. While Mary prepares vegetables, Sarah changes the water on the beef tongue, then begins mixing dough for a sweet crust that will top the potato pie. Sweet, raw beef fat from around the kidneys makes a rich, flaky pastry that adds precious calories to winter meals. The fat has been carefully rendered and stored in crocks since the autumn butchering. "We should check the pickled eggs," Sarah tells Mary. "Make sure the brine's still covering them." Eggs were seasonal wealth in Edwardian farming. Hens laid prolifically in spring and summer, but slowed or stopped completely in the darker winter months. To ensure year-round protein, surplus summer eggs were preserved using various methods, most commonly in crocks of water glass, sodium silicate, or lime water, or pickled in spiced vinegar. The Wilson family's pickled eggs sit in a large earthenware crock in the pantry, 40 or so eggs suspended in vinegar flavoured with onions, peppercorns and bay leaves. Mary carefully checks that all eggs remain fully submerged, using a wooden spoon to gently push down any that are rising too high. "2 floated," she reports. "I took them out." Floating eggs have begun to spoil, tiny pockets of gas forming inside the shell. They're still fine for animal feed, but no longer safe for humans. Even this small loss is a setback, each preserved egg representing future nutrition they can't afford to waste. As morning stretches into afternoon, the cottage fills with the rich aroma of the simmering beef tongue. Sarah adds onions, carrots and herbs to the pot, transforming the humble preserved meat into something that makes stomachs growl in anticipation. The potato pie bakes in the oven built into the side of the range, its sweet crust turning golden brown. "That smells proper good," Emma declares, coming in from feeding the chickens, her cheeks red from the cold. "Should do," Sarah responds. "It's your grandmother's recipe." Food in Edwardian farm families wasn't just sustenance, it was heritage, knowledge passed down through generations, each recipe representing accumulated wisdom about making the most of available ingredients. Sarah learned pickling from her mother, who learned from hers, techniques refined over centuries to ensure winter survival. The preservation methods that filled the Wilsons' cold store were diverse, each suited to specific foods. Smoking, where meat was hung above smouldering hardwood for days or weeks, allowing the smoke compounds to penetrate and preserve the flesh while adding flavour. The Wilsons' bacon and hams received this treatment, the smoking followed by dry curing with salt. Salt curing, perhaps the oldest preservation method, simply used massive amounts of salt to draw moisture from foods, creating an environment where bacteria couldn't survive. Their brined beef and pork had been packed in salt for weeks before being rinsed and stored. Pickling, which used vinegar's acidity to prevent spoilage. The Wilson family pickled everything from eggs to onions, cucumbers to beetroot, sometimes adding sugar for sweet pickles, other times keeping them bracingly sour. Sugar preserving, where fruits were cooked with sugar to create jams and jellies that would last for years without spoiling. The high sugar content prevented bacterial growth while preserving something of summer's sweetness for dark winter days. Potting, where cooked meat was packed into crocks and sealed with a layer of fat, creating an anaerobic environment that prevented spoilage. Sarah's potted rabbit and potted beef were family favourites, spread on bread or eaten cold in slices. Drying, the simplest method used for herbs, some fruits and occasionally meat. Bunches of herbs hung from the kitchen ceiling, while apple rings dried on strings near the fire earlier in winter. Cold storage using winter's natural refrigeration to keep root vegetables, cabbages and some fruits in a state of suspended animation until needed. Each method required specific knowledge, timing, and materials. Getting any part wrong could mean food lost to spoilage, a disaster no family could afford. The pressure to preserve correctly was enormous, the consequences of failure potentially fatal. "Will you show me how to brine meat next year?" Mary asks Sarah as they lay the table for dinner. Sarah nods, pleased at her daughter's interest. "You're old enough now. It's important you learn." This is how essential knowledge survived. Mother to daughter, father to son, each generation training the next to continue the rhythms of rural life. Mary's question isn't just about cooking techniques, it's about her future role in ensuring her own family's survival someday. When Thomas and Emma return from the afternoon chores, the kitchen is warm with cooking heat and rich with savoury smells. For a brief moment, winter's hardships recede, replaced by the simple pleasure of hunger about to be satisfied. "Wash up," Sarah instructs, lifting the heavy pot of tongue from the fire. "Food's ready." The family gathers around the table, their faces illuminated by the warm glow of an oil lamp. Though they've been working since dawn in difficult conditions, no one starts eating until Thomas has said a brief grace, thankfulness for food being no empty sentiment in winter. The beef tongue, brined and then slowly simmered until tender, is sliced and arranged on a platter. The potato pie, golden crusted and steaming when cut open, sits beside it. A small dish of pickled onions adds tangy contrast, while preserved damsons provide a sweet sour accompaniment that cuts through the richness of the meat. It's a feast by Edwardian farm standards, varied, flavourful and nutritious. The family eats appreciatively but not greedily, each portion measured to ensure leftovers for tomorrow. Even in relative plenty, the habit of stretching food is ingrained. "This tongue's proper good, Mother," Thomas approves between bites. "Cured it just right." Sarah accepts the compliment with a nod. Her preserving skills are a source of quiet pride, a concrete contribution to the family's welfare, as important as Thomas's farming or animal husbandry. As they eat, they discuss the work still to be done before nightfall. Water to fetch, animals to feed and bed down, fires to bank so they'll last through the night. The winter routine allows no true rest, just brief pauses between essential tasks. "There's a slice of ginger cake for after," Sarah says when the main course is finished. "Just a small one." This modest dessert is met with genuine excitement. Sweet treats are rare in winter, saved for Sundays or particularly hard days. The ginger cake, made with preserved ginger, molasses, and precious spices, represents a small luxury against winter's deprivations. The cake is sliced thinly, each piece savoured in small bites to make it last. Emma closes her eyes as she chews, transported momentarily by the sweet, spicy flavour. Even Thomas, not given to visible enjoyment, smiles at the taste. "Remember when Father caught his hand in the chaff cutter and you made ginger cake because he was feeling so low?" Mary asks Sarah, memory triggered by the familiar taste. Sarah nods. 3 years ago now. Thought he might lose those fingers. "Still ache when it's cold," Thomas admits, flexing his right hand where 2 fingers bear thick white scars. Farm accidents were common and potentially catastrophic in an era before antibiotics or sophisticated surgery. That Thomas kept his fingers was attributed equally to Sarah's herbal poultices and divine intervention. This casual mention of near disaster over dessert illustrates the Edwardian farmer's matter-of-fact relationship with danger. Injuries, illness, even death were woven into daily life, acknowledged but not dwelled upon. You survived by looking forward, not back. After dinner, while Sarah and the girls clean up, Thomas retreats to a corner of the kitchen with his pipe and account book. Winter evenings offer the only time for reviewing the farm's finances, calculating what they can sell come spring, what must be purchased, whether they're getting ahead or falling behind. The numbers are never as good as he hopes. Small tenant farmers like the Wilsons existed in a perpetual state of economic precarity, always one bad harvest or sick animal away from disaster. Tonight's calculations are particularly concerning. The hay is running lower than he'd like, and they'll need seed for spring planting soon. He closes the book with a sigh, drawing on his pipe. The sweet, pungent smoke curls toward the ceiling, joining the steam from washing up and the wood smoke from the fire in the kitchen's warm atmosphere. "Bad?" Sarah asks quietly when the girls are occupied elsewhere. "Tight," he replies simply. "We'll manage." She accepts this with a nod, neither demanding details nor offering false reassurance. Their partnership is built on shared reality, not comforting lies. As evening deepens toward night, the family's activities contract toward the fire. Emma practices her sewing, awkwardly forming stitches on a piece of scrap cloth. Mary mends a torn shirt, her stitches neat and even. Sarah works on knitting a new pair of stockings for Thomas, the needles clicking rhythmically. Thomas himself cleans and oils harness pieces, preparing for spring work that still seems impossibly distant. The kitchen is the only truly warm room, so all household activities concentrate here after dark. It creates a kind of forced intimacy, the family physically close as they work by lamplight. In summer, they might scatter to different tasks in different locations, but winter binds them together within the narrow radius of the fire's heat. This is the winter evening pattern that would be familiar to Edwardian farm families across Britain, a quiet time of necessary indoor work, conversations that rise and fall naturally, perhaps a Bible reading or story to pass the hours until bedtime. No television, no radio, no electronic distractions. Just human connection in a small, warm space surrounded by cold darkness. "Tell about the winter the sheep got buried," Emma requests, breaking a comfortable silence. Like all children, she enjoys hearing family stories, especially dramatic ones with happy endings. Thomas smiles faintly. "Your mother tells it better." 3 winters ago, Sarah begins, her hands continuing to knit without pause. We had snow like you've never seen, drifts higher than this cottage in places. Your father went to check the sheep in the north pasture and found nothing, not a single one, all buried completely under snow. Emma's eyes widen, though she's heard the story before. All 20? All 20, Sarah confirms. We thought they were lost for certain, but your father wouldn't give up. He took the long pole and went across that field inch by inch, poking down through the snow, searching for them. Took nearly all day, Thomas adds, warming to the tale despite himself. Sun was setting by the time I found the first one, just a little hollow in the snow where she was breathing. And they were all alive, Emma interjects excitedly, in a big group under the snow. Huddled together for warmth, Sarah nods. Created a little air pocket. Sheep aren't clever creatures generally, but they've got good instincts for survival. Took us hours to dig them out, Thomas recalls, working by lantern light, fingers near frozen, but we didn't lose a single one. The story, told and retold on winter evenings, carries multiple messages. The unpredictability of farming life, the necessity of persistence, the small miracles that sometimes occur just when hope seems lost. It's entertainment, but also education, preparing the next generation for the realities they'll face. As the evening wears on, Sarah heats water for the family's minimal washing, faces, hands and feet only in winter when heating enough water for full bathing is impractical and removing clothes for any length of time risks dangerous chilling. Each person gets a small basin of warm water and a precious sliver of hard soap, using it as efficiently as possible. Preparations for bed begin early, as morning will come before dawn as always. Hot water bottles, simple rubber bags filled with boiling water, are prepared to pre-warm the ice-cold beds. Extra layers are laid out, night clothes over day clothes sometimes in the coldest weather, for the upstairs bedrooms will be barely above freezing despite the day's fires. Bank the fire, Thomas reminds Mary, who carefully arranges coals and ashes to maintain heat overnight without wasting fuel. A properly banked fire would still have live embers in the morning, making restart easier and saving precious matches. The oil lamps are extinguished one by one as family members head upstairs, taking candles to light their way. The cottage grows darker, quieter, the night's cold already beginning to reclaim spaces away from the kitchen fire. Sarah is the last to bed, after checking that doors are secured and water buckets filled for morning. She stands for a moment in the darkened kitchen, listening to the wind outside, the occasional pop from the banked fire, the settling sounds of the old cottage. Despite the day's work and worries, she feels a moment of deep contentment. Her family is fed, warm and safe for another night. In an Edwardian winter, that's victory enough. Upstairs, despite hot water bottles and layers of blankets, beds still take time to warm from body heat. The family members curl into tight balls, conserving warmth, waiting for sleep to come. Outside their windows, stars glitter in the clear, freezing sky, winter constellations wheeling above the sleeping farm. Tomorrow will bring more cold, more work, more careful rationing of preserved food, but tonight they rest, drawing strength for whatever challenges the next day brings. This is how Edwardian farmers survived winter, one day at a time, with hard work, careful planning and the quiet courage to face each dawn no matter how bitter the cold. In their dreams, perhaps, they see spring's green promise, new lambs, freshly turned earth, seeds pushing towards sunlight. But that's still many cold weeks away, a distant hope sustained through winter's darkest days by preserved food, warm fires, and the enduring bonds of family. Morning arrives with a howling wind that rattles the cottage windows and sends snow swirling in miniature tornadoes across the yard. Thomas wakes before his pocket watch shows 5 o'clock, roused by the urgent lowing of a cow in distress. "Sarah," he murmurs, his breath clouding above the blankets. "Something's wrong in the barn." She's already awake, attuned to the different sounds of the farm, even in sleep. The brown cow? "Daisy," he confirms, swinging his legs out into the biting cold air. Doesn't sound right. In the Edwardian farming year, winter was when animals were most vulnerable. The Wilson family's livestock, 2 dairy cows, 4 sheep, a draft horse, and the chickens, represented not just their livelihood, but their wealth on legs. Losing even one animal to winter illness could devastate their precarious finances. Thomas dresses quickly in the dark, layering clothing against the cold. His movements are practiced, efficient. He's made similar pre-dawn trips to the barn countless times over the years, responding to the distress calls of animals that can't wait for daylight. "Want me to come?" Sarah offers, already reaching for her shawl. "No, stay warm. I'll call if I need you." The unspoken message is clear. There's no sense in both of them freezing if it's something simple, but they both know what his tone really means. If it's the cow calving early or something worse, Sarah's experience might make the difference between life and death. Thomas lights a lantern and steps out into the brutal cold. The temperature has dropped further overnight, the kind of cold that snatches breath away and instantly numbs exposed skin. Snow crunches beneath his boots as he makes his way to the barn, the lantern's glow creating a small sphere of light in the pre-dawn darkness. The animal's breath has frozen on the inside of the barn windows, creating intricate ice patterns that block what little light might come in. Thomas hangs the lantern on a hook and immediately moves toward Daisy's stall, where the cow is shifting uncomfortably, her distress obvious. "Easy, girl," he soothes, approaching carefully. "What's the trouble, then?" Daisy's eyes roll white with pain and fear as Thomas runs experienced hands over her swollen sides. The cow is heavy with calf, but she shouldn't be delivering for another 3 weeks at least. An early birth in these temperatures could mean losing both mother and calf. A double disaster they cannot afford. But it's not labour, Thomas realises with relief. The cow's belly is severely bloated on the left side, gas build-up from the winter feed. It's a dangerous condition that can kill quickly if not treated, but simpler to address than a complicated birth. He moves quickly to the tool area, retrieving a long rubber tube and a bottle of oil. Treating bloat requires inserting the tube down the cow's throat to release trapped gas, a procedure that demands calm from both farmer and animal. "Good girl," he murmurs as he approaches Daisy again. "This won't be pleasant, but it'll make you feel better." The procedure is difficult in the dim light and freezing barn, Thomas's fingers so cold they can barely feel the tube. But decades of experience guide him, muscle memory taking over where sensation fails. When the tube finally reaches the cow's first stomach, the release of foul-smelling gas is immediate and voluminous. "That's it," Thomas encourages, relief evident in his voice. "Let it all out." By the time Sarah arrives, wrapped in multiple layers and carrying a steaming bucket, Daisy is already improving, the dangerous swelling in her side noticeably reduced. "Bloat," Thomas explains simply. "Bad case, winter feed's too dry." Sarah nods, understanding immediately. The preserved winter fodder, dried hay and straw, lacks the moisture of summer grass, making cattle more prone to digestive issues. It's one of many winter-specific health challenges they must constantly monitor. "Brought warm water with molasses," she says, setting down the bucket. "Get her drinking again." They work together in the lantern light, coaxing the still uncomfortable cow to drink the sweet mixture that will help restore her digestive function. Neither speaks unnecessarily. The bitter cold discourages conversation, and they know each other's movements well enough to anticipate what's needed. Only when Daisy has drunk half the bucket and is looking noticeably more comfortable does Thomas step back, exhaling a long breath that clouds dramatically in the frozen air. "That was close," he admits quietly. "Another hour and we might have lost her." Sarah nods, understanding the implications. Losing Daisy would mean no milk for months until they could somehow afford another cow, no calf to either keep or sell, and one less animal to produce the manure that fertilizes their fields. Farm animals weren't pets. They were essential components in a fragile system where each loss weakened the whole. "While we're here, might as well check the others," Sarah suggests practically. Together they move through the barn, examining each animal by lantern light. The other cow, Bess, seems fine, chewing calmly on hay in her stall. The draft horse, Samson, nickers softly when Thomas runs a hand over his broad back, checking for any cold spots that might indicate poor circulation, a deadly risk in winter. He needs better bedding, Thomas notes, seeing how the horse has pushed what little straw he has into a pile, leaving parts of his body in contact with the cold floor. "We'll bring more this morning." The sheep, huddled together in their pen, are checked individually, their thick winter wool providing excellent insulation but also making it harder to detect problems underneath. Thomas parts the fleece carefully, looking for signs of parasites or infections that could weaken the animals when they need all their strength to survive winter. "This one's got foot rot starting," he says, lifting a ewe's hoof to show Sarah the early signs of the common ovine ailment. "We'll need to treat her today." Foot rot, a bacterial infection that thrives in damp conditions, was a constant winter concern for sheep. Left untreated, it could cripple an animal, preventing it from reaching food or water. Treatment was unpleasant but necessary, trimming away infected hoof tissue and applying a copper sulfate solution that burned the bacteria but also caused the sheep considerable discomfort. "I'll mix the copper wash," Sarah says, making a mental note. "Mary can help hold her." By the time they finish checking all the animals, grey dawnlight is beginning to filter through the frost-covered windows. The temperature in the barn has risen slightly with the combined body heat of the livestock, but it's still well below freezing. Thomas blows on his hands, trying to restore some feeling to his numb fingers. "We'll need more straw from the rick today," he says, mentally calculating how much bedding they can spare. "Animals need extra in this cold." Sarah nods agreement. "Girls can help after breakfast. I'll get it started." She heads back to the cottage to begin the day's first meal and wake the children, leaving Thomas to complete the morning milking. Even this routine task is complicated by winter. The cows produce less milk in cold weather, their bodies conserving energy for survival rather than production. What milk they do give is precious, providing essential nutrition when fresh food is scarce. Thomas positions the wooden milking stool beside Bess, the healthier cow, and begins the rhythmic squeezing that releases warm milk into the bucket. His fingers, still half frozen, struggle to find their usual dexterity. The cow shifts uncomfortably, sensitive to his clumsy touch. "Sorry, girl," he murmurs, flexing his hands to restore circulation. "Cold makes fools of us all." The truth is, winter makes everything harder on an Edwardian farm. Every task takes longer, requires more energy, carries greater risk. The animals feel it too, their natural instincts urging them to move less, eat more, conserve heat however possible. It's the farmer's job to work against these instincts sometimes, ensuring the livestock stay active enough to maintain health while still respecting their winter needs. When Mary arrives to help with chores, she finds her father still milking, his progress slower than usual in the bitter cold. "Morning, father," she greets, her voice muffled by the scarf wrapped around the lower half of her face. "Mother says breakfast in 20 minutes. "Tell her 30, Thomas corrects, nodding toward the milk bucket. "Bess is giving less than usual. Need to be patient with her." Mary nods, understanding, and moves to her own morning task, feeding the chickens that huddle miserably in their coop, feathers fluffed against the cold. Egg production has dropped to almost nothing in the dark winter months, but the birds still need care if they're to resume lay-in when days lengthen again. The chicken coop represents one of the many special winter arrangements made for animals on the farm. In warmer months, the birds range freely during daylight, finding much of their own food in the form of insects, seeds, and plants. In winter, they're confined to the coop and attached run, protected from snow and wind by walls reinforced with straw bales for insulation. Inside, Mary scatters grain saved specifically for this purpose, then breaks the ice in the water dish and refills it. Despite the modifications, the coop is still cold enough that water freezes solid overnight, one of many small winter challenges that must be addressed multiple times daily. "Poor silly things," she says, as the chickens peck half-heartedly at the grain. Like all farm children, she has a practical but not unsympathetic relationship with the animals. They aren't pets to be coddled, but neither are they simply production units to be exploited. There's a middle ground of respectful care that recognizes both their utility and their sentience. By the time the family reconvenes for breakfast, the day's animal care plan has been established. Treat the sheep with foot rot, add bedding throughout the barn, monitor Daisy for any return of bloat, and check the chicken coop for drafts that might be contributing to their reduced laying. "We'll need to mix a fresh batch of udder balm too," Sarah adds as she serves porridge at the kitchen table. "Bess is getting chapped from the cold." Udder balm, a homemade salve of beeswax, lard and herbs, protected the sensitive skin of milk cows from winter damage. Without it, painful cracking could lead to infections that might render a cow unmilkable, cutting off a crucial food source for the family. It's one of dozens of preventative measures Edwardian farmers took to protect livestock health through winter. "Can I help make it?" Emma asks eagerly. At 9, she's still learning the countless remedies and preparations that fill Sarah's mental encyclopedia of farm knowledge. "You can stir while I add the herbs," Sarah agrees. "It needs a steady hand." After breakfast, the family disperses to their assigned tasks, bundled against the cold that seems only to intensify as the day brightens. Thomas and Mary head to the hayrick to collect fresh bedding straw, while Sarah and Emma remain in the relative warmth of the kitchen to prepare the various animal treatments needed. The hayrick stands like a golden monument in the snow-covered field, its carefully thatched top protecting the precious winter fodder from moisture. Thomas removes the canvas covering from one side, exposing the densely packed hay beneath. "We'll take from this section," he instructs Mary, pointing to an area they haven't yet harvested. "Need to keep it even so the stack doesn't collapse." They work together, Thomas using a hay knife, essentially a very large, very sharp blade attached to a wooden handle, to cut sections from the compacted mass. The physical effort generates welcome warmth, but the exposed skin of their faces stings in the bitter wind. Mary carries armfuls of the cut hay to the sledge they've brought, piling it as high as possible to minimize trips. The sweet smell of properly dried hay rises around them, a pleasant contrast to the otherwise odorless frozen landscape. "How do you know how much they need?" she asks, watching her father gauge the quantity with experienced eyes. Depends on the weather, Thomas explains, cutting another section. Colder it gets, more bedding they need to stay warm. Tonight's supposed to be bitter, so we'll give extra. This is the constant calculation of winter animal husbandry, balancing the immediate needs of livestock against the finite supplies that must last until spring. Use too much hay for bedding and there might not be enough for food later. Use too little and animals might sicken from cold or develop sores from lying on hard surfaces. When the sledge is piled high, they drag it together across the snow toward the barn, the runners sliding easily over the frozen surface. Inside, they distribute fresh bedding to each animal according to need, most to the horse, whose large body loses heat quickly despite his winter coat, least to the sheep, who have natural insulation in their wool. Pack it deeper in the corners, Thomas instructs as they bed down the cow stalls. That's where drafts get in. The barn itself has been winterized as much as possible with their limited resources. Cracks between boards have been stuffed with straw or sealed with clay. A partial hayloft above provides some ceiling insulation. Strategic placement of straw bales creates windbreaks around the most vulnerable areas. Still, it's far from what modern farmers would consider adequate winter housing. There's no true heat source besides the animals themselves. Drinking water freezes regularly and must be replenished with buckets carried from the well. Drafts find their way through countless small openings. It's survival shelter, not comfort. Yet compared to the conditions endured by many farm animals in Edwardian Britain, the Wilson livestock are relatively fortunate. Their barn is solid, their food adequate if not abundant, their caretakers attentive to their needs. On larger commercial farms, animals might be packed into insufficient space with minimal bedding, their health secondary to economic concerns. Meanwhile, in the cottage kitchen, Sarah and Emma work on the various remedies needed for winter animal care. The udder balm bubbles gently in a small pot over the fire, filling the room with the scent of beeswax and lavender. Nearby, a stronger-smelling mixture steeps, the copper sulfate solution for treating the sheep's foot rot. "Why can't we use the udder balm for the sheep's feet too?" Emma asks, carefully stirring the salve with a wooden spoon. "Wouldn't that be nicer for her?" "Different problems need different treatments," Sarah explains patiently. "The balm soothes and protects, but it won't kill the rot. For that we need something stronger, even if it's not as pleasant." This practical approach to animal medicine characterized Edwardian farming. Remedies were valued for effectiveness rather than gentleness, and preventing suffering sometimes paradoxically required causing temporary discomfort. Most treatments were homemade from readily available materials, veterinarians being expensive luxuries rarely called except for the most valuable animals in dire emergencies. By midday, all the preparations are complete, and the family reconvenes to treat the ailing sheep. Each person has a specific role in the procedure: Thomas to catch and hold the animal, Mary to clean the affected hoof, Sarah to apply the treatment, and Emma to keep the other sheep from interfering. The ewe in question is not cooperative, sensing the coming discomfort with animal intuition. She evades Thomas's first attempt to catch her, darting between straw bales with surprising agility for an animal carrying a full winter coat and an unborn lamb. "Got a turn of speed for something so woolly," Thomas mutters, circling to try again. His second attempt succeeds, hands closing firmly around the sheep's body in a practiced hold that prevents kicking while supporting weight comfortably. The ewe bleats protest but can't escape as Thomas lowers her gently to a sitting position, exposing her feet for treatment. "Hold steady," he instructs Mary, who kneels in the straw to examine the infected hoof. The early stage foot rot is visible as a reddened area between the toes, not yet progressed to the more severe tissue damage that can cripple sheep if left untreated. Mary cleans the area with a cloth dipped in warm water, her touch gentle but thorough. Good, Sarah approves, kneeling beside her daughter with the copper sulfate solution. Now hold her foot still while I apply this. The sheep struggles as the stinging solution contacts raw tissue, nearly breaking free despite Thomas's firm grip. It takes all three of them to complete the treatment, Thomas restraining, Mary holding the hoof steady, and Sarah ensuring the solution reaches all affected areas. There, Sarah says finally, releasing the foot. We'll treat her again in 2 days if it's not improving. Thomas lets the ewe up, and she immediately retreats to the far side of the pen, shaking her treated foot and giving the humans accusatory looks. The process is repeated with a preventative application to the other sheep, none of which show active infection, but all of which could benefit from protection. Why do they get sick in winter more than summer? Emma asks, watching the sheep huddle together again after their ordeal. Wet and crowded, Thomas explains simply. They're out grazing separate in summer, feet dry out between rains. Winter they're packed in here, standing in the same straw that gets damp, perfect for rot to spread. This is one of countless seasonal health cycles that Edwardian farmers tracked and managed. Each season brought its own typical ailments, its own preventative measures, its own treatments. Winter's close confinement created particular vulnerabilities: respiratory infections, parasites, hoof problems, and diet-related issues all increased when animals spent more time in shared indoor spaces. As the short winter day begins its early progression toward darkness, the family continues their animal care routine. Fresh water is provided, replacing buckets that have begun to freeze over again. Feed is distributed according to careful calculations, enough to maintain health and warmth, not so much as to waste precious stores that must last months yet. The animals themselves have adapted to winter conditions as best they can. The sheep stand close together, sharing body heat through their thick fleeces. The cows lie in their fresh straw, conserving energy through reduced movement. The horse occasionally paws at his bedding, instinctively arranging it for maximum insulation. The chickens fluff their feathers, creating air pockets that trap warmth against their bodies. Thomas makes a final inspection as twilight approaches, checking each animal once more before night falls completely. It's a critical time. The coming hours will be the coldest of the day, when livestock are most vulnerable to the potentially fatal effects of winter cold. "Daisy's looking better," he reports when he returns to the cottage, stamping snow from his boots at the door. "Bloat's gone completely. Other animals seem sound." Sarah nods, relief visible in her expression. They've averted crisis today, this time, but winter is far from over, and tomorrow will bring new challenges, new risks to the animals that represent both livelihood and responsibility. "Supposed to snow again tonight," Thomas adds, warming his hands at the fire. "Probably need to dig out the barn door by morning." Weather dictates everything in winter farm life: work patterns, animal care, even the family's own comfort. A predicted snowfall means adjusting plans, preparing for harder access to outbuildings, ensuring animals have extra feed in case humans can't reach them easily for morning chores. As darkness falls completely, the Wilson family gathers again around the kitchen table for their evening meal. Mutton stew tonight, made from a shoulder of one of last year's lambs, preserved through salting and now providing essential protein for cold weather energy. The conversation naturally includes the day's animal concerns, planning for tomorrow's needs, discussing longer-term care strategies. "I think Daisy's calf will come early," Sarah remarks, serving second helpings to Thomas and Mary, who've worked hardest physically today. "She's showing signs already." Thomas nods agreement. "Another week, maybe 2, not the 3 we expected." A winter birth brings both opportunity and risk. A healthy calf represents future milk production or potential sale income, but birthing complications occur more frequently in cold weather, and newborns are extremely vulnerable to chilling. If Daisy delivers during a severe cold snap, the calf might need to be brought into the cottage kitchen for its first days, an arrangement that would be malodorous and inconvenient but might make the difference between life and death for the valuable animal. We should prepare the birthing pen tomorrow, Thomas decides. Extra straw, hanging the lantern for warmth, just in case. This forward planning characterized successful Edwardian farmers, always anticipating the next need, the next risk, the next opportunity. Those who survived and prospered weren't necessarily the strongest or wealthiest, but rather those who prepared most thoroughly and adapted most quickly to changing conditions. As they finish the meal and begin evening chores, Thomas pauses by the window, looking out at the barn just visible in the moonlight, reflecting off snow. There's worry in his expression, the concern of someone responsible for vulnerable lives in harsh conditions. "They'll be all right," Sarah says quietly, seeing his face. "We've seen them through worse winters." Thomas nods, but his expression remains solemn. "Just hope the sheep don't drop lambs early too. Don't fancy trying to raise orphans in this cold." The spectre of orphan lambs, often the result of difficult births or mothers too weak to nurse, represents one of winter's cruelest challenges. Bottle-feeding infant animals around the clock is exhausting work with uncertain outcomes. Some farmers didn't bother, considering the effort greater than the potential return, but the Wilsons would try to save any lamb born alive, partly from economic necessity and partly from their own sense of responsibility toward the animals in their care. That night, Thomas makes an extra trip to the barn before bed, checking the animals one final time despite the bitter cold and his own exhaustion. It's a devotion born not just of financial interest, but of the complex bond that develops between farmers and their livestock, a relationship not easily categorized as either purely emotional or purely practical, but containing elements of both. In the quiet barn, lit only by his lantern, Thomas moves from stall to pen to coop, ensuring all is well before he himself can rest. The animals stir sleepily at his presence, then settle again, accustomed to these nighttime checks. Their collective breathing creates a peaceful rhythm in the cold air, a reminder of the living warmth that persists even in winter's grip. Tomorrow will bring new challenges in the ongoing battle to keep these creatures healthy through the harshest season, but for tonight they are safe, fed, and as comfortable as Edwardian ingenuity and care can make them. In the precarious balance of winter farm life, that counts as victory. The predicted snow arrives overnight, several inches of fresh powder adding to the already considerable drifts. Thomas wakes in darkness to the muffled silence that only heavy snowfall brings, a quality of quiet both peaceful and isolating. He knows without looking that the day ahead will involve significant digging before regular chores can even begin. "Damn snow," he mutters, reaching for his clothes in the frigid bedroom. The coldest hours come just before dawn, and the cottage has chilled to near freezing overnight despite the banked fire below. The winter light remains dim even as Thomas makes his way downstairs, pocket watch showing nearly 6:30. These short days are another challenge of winter farming. Critical outdoor work must be compressed into the brief daylight hours or completed by unreliable lantern light at greater risk. In the kitchen, Sarah already has the fire building back to strength, the kettle beginning its morning song on the hob. The familiar scent of porridge cooking provides momentary comfort before the day's challenges. "Looks like a foot of new snow," Sarah reports, having already peered out the back door, "drifting against the barn door again. Thomas nods grimly, accepting the cup of hot tea she offers. We'll need the snow shovels, all of them. The tools of winter farming are as specialised as those for any other season, though less glamorous than the ploughs and scythes that dominate summer work. Snow shovels with wide wooden blades, modified brooms for clearing lighter falls, ice picks for breaking frozen water troughs, and the essential digging bar for penetrating frozen ground. These humble implements become life-saving equipment when winter tightens its grip. After a quick but essential breakfast, the family bundles into their heaviest outdoor clothing. Even Emma, at 9, knows her role in the morning snow clearing. Smaller paths are her responsibility, while Thomas tackles the critical barn access and Sarah ensures the well remains usable. Take the ash bucket, Thomas reminds Mary as they prepare to head out. Spread it on the path to the privy so your mother doesn't slip. The bucket contains cold ashes saved from the fire, stored specifically for providing traction on icy paths. It's one of countless small adaptations to winter conditions, knowledge passed down through generations of farmers who learned, sometimes through painful experience, how to mitigate winter's unique hazards. Outside, the world has been transformed yet again, familiar farm features buried under smooth white drifts. The snow has stopped falling but still swirls in the bitter wind, stinging exposed skin and quickly infiltrating any gap in clothing. They work with practiced efficiency, each person tackling their assigned area. Thomas focuses on the path to the barn, where snow has indeed drifted against the main door, a sloped wall of white nearly 3 feet high. The wooden snow shovel, wider and lighter than a conventional digging spade, allows him to move significant quantities with each scoop. But it's still exhausting work in the bitter cold. Paths clear to the chicken coop, Emma reports, her small face red with cold and effort above her woolen scarf. But the water's frozen solid in their drinker. Fill a bucket with warm water from the kitchen, Thomas directs, pausing to catch his breath. Just enough to thaw it, mind, don't waste hot water. Mary works on clearing access to the hay rick, a task complicated by particularly deep drifts in the open field. The hay sledge will need to be brought out later for fresh bedding and feed, and without a clear path, that essential task becomes far more difficult. By the time the critical paths are cleared, everyone's fingers and toes have gone numb despite layers of woolen stockings and mittens. They retreat briefly to the kitchen to warm extremities before tackling the morning animal care, sipping hot tea with hands held painfully close to the fire as circulation returns. We'll need to check all the tools today, Thomas says as feeling returns to his fingers. This weather holds. We might be digging out again tomorrow. And the harness needs mending, Sarah adds. That trace leather's about to go. Winter on an Edwardian farm wasn't just about surviving until spring. It was also about preparing for it. The relatively quieter season, when fields lay dormant under snow, provided essential time for maintaining the equipment that would be needed the moment weather allowed planting to begin. Neglecting these tasks could mean catastrophic delays when every spring day counted. After completing the morning animal care, a routine complicated by frozen water buckets, stiff gate latches, and livestock restless from confinement, Thomas turns his attention to the tool shed. This small outbuilding adjacent to the barn houses the farm's essential implements, from simple hand tools to more complex equipment like plows and harrows. "Mary, come help me check the tools," he calls as they finish distributing hay to the sheep. Good time to learn what needs doing. The tool shed is dark and considerably colder than the barn, having no animal warmth to temper the winter chill. Thomas lights a lantern, illuminating the carefully organised space. Unlike some farmers who carelessly piled equipment into sheds or left it exposed to the elements, Thomas maintains strict order in his tool storage. Each implement has its place, making inventory and maintenance more efficient. First rule of farming, he tells Mary as they survey the collected implements. Take care of your tools and they'll take care of you. This wisdom, passed from father to daughter, represents one of farming's most fundamental principles. In an era before easy replacement, when each tool represented significant investment and crucial capability, proper maintenance wasn't optional. It was essential for survival. Let's start with the plow, Thomas decides, moving toward the most important single implement on the farm. The horse-drawn plow stands in a corner, its metal share and coulter gleaming dully in the lantern light. Though it won't be used for months yet, its condition, at first spring thaw, will determine how quickly and effectively the all-important planting can begin. What are we checking for? Mary asks, running a hand along the curved mouldboard that turns soil as the plough moves. Or rust mainly, Thomas explains, kneeling despite protesting knees to examine the cutting edge of the share, but also loose fittings, cracks in the wood, anything that might fail when we need it most. They examine the plough methodically, Thomas demonstrating how to check each component, the share that cuts horizontally into soil, the coulter that slices vertically ahead of it, the mouldboard that turns the cut furrow, and the various wooden and metal parts that connect these to the horse's harness. See here. Thomas points to a spot where moisture has caused the beginning of rust on the share's edge. That needs dealing with today. Rust pits the metal, makes it drag through soil instead of cutting clean. From a shelf, he retrieves a small pot of grease and a scrap of wool cloth. Mutton tallow mixed with a bit of linseed oil, he explains, scooping a small amount onto the cloth. Best thing for protecting metal through winter. Mary watches closely as her father demonstrates the proper treatment, rubbing the grease mixture into the metal with circular motions, ensuring every part of the exposed surface receives a protective coating. It's a simple task, but crucial. Neglected metal quickly deteriorates in winter's damp conditions, and replacement parts are expensive when available at all. You try, Thomas hands the cloth to Mary. Do the coulter while I check the harness attachments. Mary applies herself to the task with the seriousness of someone who understands this isn't merely helping father, it's learning essential skills that her future may depend on. Farming knowledge transfers this way, hands-on instruction in seemingly minor tasks that collectively represent the difference between prosperity and failure. They move methodically through the shed, checking each implement in turn. Harrows for loosening soil, seed drills for planting, hoes for weeding, scythes for harvesting. Each receives appropriate maintenance. Metal parts are greased against rust, wooden handles checked for cracks or splinters, moving parts exercised to prevent seizing. What about this? Mary asks, indicating a curious implement with a broad blade attached to a long wooden handle. Or root cutter, Thomas identifies it, for preparing mangolds and turnips for the animals, speaking of which we should check it's working properly. We'll need it this afternoon. The root cutter is a simple but ingenious device that transforms large, hard vegetables into manageable pieces that livestock can eat without choking. With winter feed stores dwindling, the preserved root vegetables in the cellar provide essential supplementary nutrition for the animals, particularly the pregnant cow and sheep who need extra energy in their final months before birthing. Thomas takes the implement down from its wall hooks, examining the blade edge with an experienced eye. Needs sharpening, he decides. Fetch the whetstone from the box, would you? Mary retrieves the whetstone, a rectangular block of fine-grained stone used for honing edge tools. She watches as Thomas demonstrates the proper technique, holding the blade at a consistent angle while drawing the stone across its edge in smooth, firm strokes. Not too steep an angle, he instructs, or you'll weaken the edge. Nice and steady, let the stone do the work. He hands the tool to Mary, guiding her hands through the first few strokes until she finds the rhythm. It's precise work that requires concentration, especially in the cold shed where fingers quickly grow stiff and less sensitive. Good, Thomas approves after watching her technique for several minutes. Few more passes and that'll do nicely. The sharpening complete, they test the blade on a piece of scrap wood, Thomas nodding satisfaction when it slices cleanly with minimal pressure. Sharp tools mean less work, he tells Mary. Remember that. As they continue the inventory and maintenance, Thomas points out specific concerns relevant to winter storage. Wood handles dry out and shrink in the cold. Come spring, they'll be loose in their fittings. We'll need to soak and wedge them before serious work. This forward-thinking approach, addressing problems before they occur, characterizes successful Edwardian farming. Without modern conveniences like hardware stores or equipment dealers nearby, anticipating needs and preventing failures was far more practical than reactive repairs. Their methodical progress through the tool shed is interrupted by Sarah calling from outside, her voice carrying urgency. "Thomas! Water pipe to the trough has burst." Thomas and Mary hurry outside to find Sarah standing by the main water trough, which in better weather provides drinking water for the livestock directly from a pipe connected to the well. Now, water sprays from a split in the pipe, instantly freezing in the bitter air and creating an expanding ice slick around the trough. "Damn," Thomas mutters, immediately assessing the situation. "Mary, run and get the pipe wrench and some rags. Quick now." This is one of winter's most common emergencies on farms with even rudimentary plumbing, water freezing and expanding inside pipes until metal or wood can no longer contain the pressure. The resulting burst can waste precious water and create dangerous ice hazards if not addressed immediately. Mary returns quickly with the requested tools, having known exactly where to find them. Thanks to the morning's inventory work, Thomas has already located the shut-off valve near the well and stopped the flow, but significant damage is already done. "Hold the lantern," he instructs Mary, kneeling in the snow beside the burst section of pipe. The metal has split along a seam, a clean break that might be repairable without replacement, a fortunate circumstance given the impossibility of digging new pipe trenches in frozen ground. Thomas works quickly despite the cold, wrapping the split section tightly with cloth rags soaked in pine tar, a temporary seal that might hold until proper repairs can be made in warmer weather. Over this, he secures a piece of scrap leather using wire tightly wound with the pipe wrench to apply tension. "That should hold for now," he says finally, standing with knees creaking from the cold and awkward position. "We'll have to water by hand until spring thaw, though. Can't risk pressure on that patch." This adaptation, reverting to more labour-intensive methods when winter damages labour-saving improvements, was a common pattern in Edwardian farming. The relationship between traditional and modern techniques wasn't a simple progression, but rather a complex negotiation, with older methods often serving as essential backups when newer ones failed. By the time they return to the cottage for the midday meal, all three are exhausted, despite having completed only morning chores and emergency repairs. Winter farm work extracts a higher energy cost than summer labour, the body burning extra calories simply maintaining temperature while still performing necessary tasks. "Eat well," Sarah encourages, serving thick slices of bread alongside bean and bacon soup. "Cold takes it out of you." The afternoon brings its own tasks, centered around the root cellar, a stone-lined underground room where winter vegetables are stored in sand or straw to prevent freezing. Thomas and Mary retrieve the newly sharpened root cutter from the tool shed, then collect a wooden trug of mangolds, a type of beet grown specifically for animal feed, from the cellar's carefully organized stores. About a third gone, Thomas notes, surveying the remaining root vegetables. Should just see us through if we're careful. The root cellar represents another aspect of winter farming invisible to casual observers. The careful calculation of consumption rates, the constant mental arithmetic of supplies divided by days until natural food becomes available again. Too generous with feed now, and animals might starve in late winter. Too frugal, and they might weaken from inadequate nutrition, becoming vulnerable to disease or failing to produce healthy offspring. They carry the mangolds to the barn, where they set up the root cutter on an old barrel. The newly sharpened blade makes quick work of the hard vegetables, slicing them into manageable pieces that even the sheep can safely eat. It's messy work, the juice-staining hands and clothing, but the animals' evident enthusiasm for the fresh food makes the effort worthwhile. "Look how they love it," Emma observes, having joined them to help distribute the cut roots. "Like it's cake or something." "Their bodies know what they need," Thomas explains. "Watching the sheep especially eagerly devour their portions gets tiresome eating nothing but hay day after day." This understanding of animal psychology alongside physical needs characterized good Edwardian farmers. Livestock weren't simply production machines, but complex living beings whose mental state affected their physical health and productivity. Providing variety in winter feed wasn't mere sentimentality, but practical animal husbandry. As the short winter day begins its early progression toward darkness, the family turns to indoor maintenance tasks that can be completed by lamplight. The cottage's main room becomes a workshop of sorts, with various projects spread across available surfaces. Sarah and Emma work on mending harness leather at the kitchen table, using awls to make holes and heavy waxed thread to create durable stitches that must withstand significant strain when in use. The leather trace Thomas mentioned earlier, part of the system that connects horse to plow, receives particular attention, with reinforcing patches applied to worn areas. Meanwhile, Thomas and Mary occupy the area nearest the fire, where Thomas demonstrates the proper method for splicing rope, creating a permanent join without knots that might weaken the line or catch on equipment. The technique involves unraveling rope strands, then interweaving them in a specific pattern that becomes nearly invisible when complete. "Why not just tie knots?" Mary asks, struggling to maintain the correct pattern in her practice piece. "Knots create weak points," Thomas explains patiently. "Rope breaks there under strain. A good splice is strong as the original rope." The family works steadily as darkness falls completely outside, the wind occasionally rattling windows in a reminder of the harsh conditions they're sheltered from. The lamplight creates a warm circle around their various projects, lending a deceptive coziness to what is, in reality, essential preparation for continued survival. They rarely purchase new tools or equipment, instead maintaining and repairing existing items with ingenious adaptations. A broken spade handle is reshaped and fitted to a different blade. Worn leather is cut and reconfigured into smaller but still useful pieces. Metal parts from beyond repair implements are salvaged for potential future use. This culture of repair rather than replacement wasn't merely thrift but necessity in rural Edwardian England. The nearest town with hardware supplies was 5 miles away, a significant journey in winter conditions. Mail-order catalogues offered more options, but at prices many small farmers could ill afford. Self-sufficiency through maintenance and adaptation was the practical solution. As the evening progresses, conversation flows naturally around the work, touching on plans for coming days, memories of past winters, hopes for spring. The physical act of creating and repairing seems to loosen tongues, making space for reflections that might otherwise go unspoken. "Remember the winter the pump handle broke?" Sarah asks, glancing up from her stitching. "Your father spent 3 days carving a new one from oak." Thomas nods, smiling slightly at the memory. Hands were blistered raw by the end, but it lasted longer than the original in the end. These shared recollections serve multiple purposes: entertainment during repetitive work, reinforcement of family identity through common history, and education for the children about problem-solving in adverse conditions. The stories nearly always follow a similar pattern: challenge faced, resources assessed, solution implemented, lesson learned. "Will we need to carve another handle sometime?" Emma asks, fascinated by the idea of creating something so essential from raw materials. "Hope not," Thomas replies, "but if we do, you'll help and you'll learn how. That's how it goes." This simple statement encapsulates the Edwardian approach to passing farming knowledge between generations, practical apprenticeship in every aspect of rural life, ensuring skills weren't lost even as formal education began claiming more of children's time. As evening deepens and work is gradually set aside, Thomas makes a final check of the day's completed maintenance: harness mended, tools cleaned and protected, ropes spliced for spring use. Each task represents not just immediate care, but investment in future capability, preparation for the moment when winter finally releases its grip and the urgent work of growing food begins again. Outside, stars glitter in the clear, bitter-cold sky, winter constellations wheeling above the sleeping farm. Inside, the family gathers close to the fire's diminishing warmth, their hands bearing the marks of the day's labour: calluses, small cuts, ingrained dirt that even thorough washing won't completely remove. These are the hands of Edwardian farmers in winter: chapped, scarred, capable hands that maintain the tools that maintain life itself through the harshest season. After 3 days of bitter cold, the temperature rises just enough to make outdoor work bearable without the constant threat of frostbite. Thomas wakes to a subtle difference in the cottage air, still cold but lacking the brutal edge that had dominated the previous week. "Might get above freezing today," he comments as the family gathers for breakfast. "Good day for market if the roads are passable." The monthly winter market in the nearest town represents more than just commerce for isolated farm families. It's vital connection to the wider community, a chance to exchange news as well as goods to maintain social bonds strained by winter isolation. For the Wilson children especially, market day offers welcome relief from the monotony of farm chores and limited company. "Can I come?" Emma asks immediately, eyes bright with anticipation. "Please, father?" Thomas considers, glancing at Sarah for her assessment. Winter travel carries risks that must be weighed against benefits. The 5-mile journey to town might take twice as long in snow conditions, and unexpected weather changes could make return dangerous. But the need for supplies is real, and the psychological boost of broader human contact shouldn't be discounted. "You and your mother stay," he decides finally. "Mary and I will go. Less wait for Samson to pull through the drifts." The draft horse, their only means of transportation in winter, can manage the sledge better with fewer passengers. It's a practical decision, though Emma's disappointment is evident in her fallen expression. "We need you here," Sarah tells her gently. "The Thatchers are coming by to borrow the wool carders. You can help me make something nice for them to eat." This neighbourly visit, mentioned casually, illustrates another crucial aspect of Edwardian winter survival, the interdependent community of farms that surrounded even the most isolated homesteads. The Thatchers, whose farm lies a mile down the valley, aren't just neighbours but essential allies in the struggle against winter hardship. "Are they bringing news from the valley?" Mary asks, immediately understanding the visit's importance beyond the stated purpose of borrowing tools. "Expect so," Thomas nods. "James usually makes it to the post office more often than we do." In the scattered farm communities of Edwardian England, this informal news network served as the primary communication system through winter months when regular travel became difficult or impossible. Each family that managed a journey to town or received visitors from elsewhere became a conduit for information. Everything from personal messages to crucial updates about weather, market prices, or illness in the community. After breakfast, Thomas and Mary prepare for the market journey. The sledge is checked carefully, runners examined for damage that might fail during travel. Samson is given extra feed to fuel the demanding journey, his harness inspected with particular attention to stress points. "Take the red scarf," Sarah instructs Mary as she helps her daughter bundle up in multiple layers. "If weather turns, you can be seen better in the snow." This practical advice reflects the very real dangers of winter travel in an era before motorised rescue or reliable weather forecasting. Being visible to potential help could make the difference between survival and tragedy if conditions deteriorated suddenly. Thomas loads the sledge with their market goods, a crock of Sarah's preserved eggs, 2 wheels of cheese aged since autumn, knitted mittens and socks made during long winter evenings, and a small pouch of dried medicinal herbs from last summer's garden. Though modest, these offerings represent valuable trade currency in the winter economy when fresh produce is scarce. "We'll aim to be back before dark," Thomas tells Sarah as he and Mary climb onto the sledge. "If we're not, don't wait on supper." The unspoken subtext is clear. If they haven't returned by full dark, something has gone wrong. In that case, Sarah would need to make difficult decisions about potential rescue attempts versus keeping herself and Emma safe at the cottage. With a flick of the reins, Thomas sets Samson in motion, the horse's powerful muscles straining against the sledge's weight in deep snow. They move slowly down the farm track toward the main road, Mary's red scarf bright against the monochrome landscape like a splash of blood on white linen. Back at the cottage, Sarah and Emma begin preparations for their visitors. The cottage isn't dirty by Edwardian farm standards, but Sarah still insists on additional cleaning before guests arrive, a cultural imperative that transcends practical necessity. Appearances matter, even among neighbours who understand the challenges of winter housekeeping. "Sweep behind the stove," she directs Emma, while she herself scrubs the already clean kitchen table with greater vigour than usual, and make sure there's no dust on the dresser shelves. Emma complies without complaint, understanding intuitively that these preparations are about dignity as much as cleanliness. The Wilsons may be struggling through winter like everyone else, but they maintain standards, keep their self-respect through attention to details that might seem trivial to modern observers. The wool carders the Thatchers are coming to borrow stand ready on the dresser, simple implement with wooden handles and wire teeth that transform raw wool into preparation for spinning. The Wilsons' 4 sheep won't be sheared until spring, but the Thatchers have a larger flock that includes a few early lambing ewes already shedding wool that can be collected and processed. Should we make gingerbread? Emma suggests hopefully, knowing that special recipes are often saved for company. Sarah considers their stores, mentally calculating what can be spared. We'll do an oatcake with the last of the dried blackberries in it, she decides. Save the ginger for when someone's ill. Even hospitality must be balanced against future needs in the winter economy. The dried ginger root, purchased at considerable expense last market day, represents potential medicine more than culinary luxury. The dried blackberries, however, can be sacrificed for social connection, a different but equally important form of survival. As Sarah mixes the oatcake batter, a heavy knock at the door announces their visitors earlier than expected. Emma rushes to open it, revealing James Thatcher and his son William, stamping snow from their boots on the threshold. "Thought we'd be blown back home a couple times." James greets them, unwinding his scarf as he enters. At 50, he's older than Thomas, his face weathered by decades of outdoor work in all conditions. Winds picking up something fierce. This casual weather report carries significant weight. Conditions that challenged even local travel might make the longer market journey dangerous. Sarah's expression tightens slightly with concern for Thomas and Mary, but she maintains hospitable composure. "Come in by the fire," she welcomes them. "I've just put an oatcake in. It'll be ready shortly." William, 16 and already working his father's farm full-time, nods shy greeting to Emma. Though close neighbours, the children see each other irregularly in winter, making these visits important social connections for young people otherwise confined to immediate family. "Thomas and Mary went to market," James inquires, warming his hands at the fire. "Left 2 hours past," Sarah confirms, "hoping to be back before dark." James nods, his expression suggesting he'll share his weather concerns later, away from the children's ears. This protective filtering of information, adults deciding what worries children should be exposed to, characterized the Edwardian approach to family communication during hardship. "Brought you something," William says to Emma, reaching into his coat pocket and producing a small wooden carving of a sheep. "Made it last night." The simple gift represents hours of work by lamplight, the kind of winter craft that occupied evening hours when outdoor work was impossible. That William has spent this time creating something specifically for Emma indicates the importance of maintaining connections beyond immediate family, building community bonds that might someday prove essential for survival. Emma accepts the carving with genuine delight, turning it over to admire the simple but recognizable details. "It looks just like our Daisy," she exclaims, referring to one of their own sheep. "Thank you." While the children examine the carving, James updates Sarah on community news, information that travels from farm to farm like a slow-moving current, keeping isolated households connected to the wider world. "Smith's lost 2 lambs to the cold last week," he reports quietly, "and old Martha Jenkins has been bedridden with chest illness since before Christmas." These snippets might seem like mere gossip, but they constitute crucial intelligence in the winter farming community. The Smiths' lamb losses signal potential vulnerabilities in all local flocks. Martha's illness represents both personal concern for a neighbour and practical warning about prevalent health threats. "We've been lucky so far," Sarah responds. "Bloat in Daisy last week, but Thomas caught it early. This sharing of animal health information serves both practical and social purposes, offering potentially useful knowledge to other farmers while reinforcing the shared experience that binds the community together. Everyone faces similar challenges. No one faces them entirely alone." As the oatcake bakes, filling the cottage with its hearty aroma, James raises another matter: the real purpose behind this ostensible tool-borrowing visit. "Church Roof Fund needs more support," he says, accepting a cup of tea from Sarah. "Reverend's asking all families to contribute what they can before Easter." The village church, 5 miles distant, serves as both spiritual centre and community hub for the scattered farms. Its physical maintenance represents collective responsibility rather than individual choice, regardless of how frequently any particular family might attend services. How much are families giving? Sarah asks practically, already calculating what they might spare from their meagre winter resources. 5 shillings where possible, James replies, his tone acknowledging this is a significant sum for small farmers in winter, but Reverend says any amount helps. Some are giving labour instead, William's offering carpentry when weather permits. Sarah nods thoughtfully. "I'll discuss with Thomas. We might manage 3 shillings, or perhaps some of my preserves for the Easter fund sale." This negotiation illustrates the complex economy of rural communities where cash, goods and labour held fluid, interchangeable value. Few families had sufficient currency for all needs, especially by late winter, when autumn sales had long been spent on necessities. Yet community obligations remained, accommodated through creative contribution rather than standardized payment. The conversation turns to more immediate concerns as Sarah serves the freshly baked oatcake, still warm from the oven. The dried blackberries provide welcome bursts of concentrated summer flavour in the otherwise plain dish, a small luxury that elevates the simple hospitality. "Any word from town lately?" Sarah asks, serving James a slightly larger portion in recognition of his status as guest and community elder. "Post came through Wednesday," he confirms between appreciative bites. "Brought newspaper from Christmas week. Nothing much changed in the world, seems like." This delayed news cycle represented normal winter conditions for isolated communities. Information arrived sporadically, often weeks out of date, creating a different relationship with world events than urban dwellers experienced. The pace matched the season, slowed, subdued, focused on immediate surroundings rather than distant happenings. "Any word on coal prices?" Sarah inquires, touching on a matter of practical concern. Their own coal supply is dwindling faster than ideal, and replacement would strain their limited funds. James grimaces. Up again, by all accounts. That strike in Wales last autumn still affecting supplies. This brief exchange reveals the connections between seemingly distant events and intimate farm concerns. A labour dispute in Welsh mines months earlier now influences how warm an isolated Devon farm family might be for the remainder of winter. The political becomes deeply personal when resources are limited and alternatives few. While the adults discuss such practical matters, Emma and William have moved to the corner by the dresser, where William demonstrates proper technique for using the wool carders his family has come to borrow. "Not too hard," he explains, showing how the wire-toothed implements should be drawn across each other. "Just enough to separate the fibres, see?" This casual instruction represents another aspect of winter's community knowledge transfer, skills passed not just within families but between them, ensuring essential capabilities remained distributed throughout the local population. If illness or accident removed one family's expertise, others could step in with necessary knowledge. The cottage has grown noticeably warmer with additional bodies present, conversation creating a different atmosphere than the usual family quiet. Sarah appears more animated than usual, James more talkative than his typical taciturn manner in other contexts. Winter isolation makes social contact precious, conversation a luxury eagerly consumed when available. "Heard anything from the Cooper farm?" Sarah asks, referring to neighbours several miles distant, too far for casual winter visiting. James's expression turns sombre. "Mary Cooper came by 2 days past. John's been laid up with his back again. They're struggling with the daily chores." Sarah immediately begins mental calculations of what they might spare to help. Perhaps a visit from Thomas to assist with heavy work, maybe some preserved food if the Cooper's stores are running low. These automatic considerations of how to help aren't extraordinary charity, but ordinary community functioning. Next week it might be the Wilsons needing similar assistance. "We could send some of our preserved pork," she suggests. "Thomas will be passing their way when he checks the far field drainage next week." James nods approval. "I sent William over yesterday to help with their firewood. Between us all, we'll see them through." This casual cooperation, unrecognised as remarkable by any participant, represents the invisible support network that sustained rural communities through winter hardship. No formal organisation coordinated these efforts. They emerged organically from shared understanding of interdependence. Today's helper might be tomorrow's helped, a reality everyone acknowledged without explicit discussion. As the afternoon progresses, conversation shifts to spring planning, a favourite winter topic that provides psychological relief from immediate conditions through anticipation of better times ahead. "Thinking of trying those new seed potatoes this year," James mentions. "Robinson's had good results last season, according to his boy." This exchange of agricultural intelligence constitutes another crucial community function, distributing innovation while managing risk. New varieties or techniques could improve yields, but failure might mean hunger. By sharing experiences, the community collectively tests improvements while maintaining sufficient traditional practices as security. The discussion of spring planting is interrupted by the unmistakable sound of sledge runners on packed snow outside. Thomas and Mary returning from market earlier than expected. Emma runs to open the door, revealing the travellers looking wind-chapped but satisfied with their journey. "Made good time," Thomas explains, stomping snow from his boots. "Road better packed than we thought." The sledge, visible behind him, contains several packages wrapped against weather, successful purchases made possible by their modest market sales. Mary follows, carrying a small parcel with particular care, her expression suggesting special content. "The Thatchers are here," Emma announces unnecessarily, excitement making her state the obvious. Thomas nods, greeting to James as he enters, the men exchanging that particular handshake of farmers that acknowledges shared experience without requiring verbal expression. Mary carefully places her special package on the dresser before removing her outer layers, suggesting contents requiring gentle handling. "How was town?" Sarah asks, already preparing fresh tea for the returned travellers. "Busy for winter," Thomas reports, accepting the steaming cup gratefully. "More people than expected. News about the factory expanding brought folks looking for information." This casual mention of industrial development represents the encroaching modern world that was gradually transforming rural England even in remote areas. The factory in question, a wool processing plant in the market town, offered potential off-farm income for struggling agricultural families, a lifeline that nevertheless threatened traditional farming patterns. "Any hiring yet?" James asks, the question revealing interest beyond mere curiosity. Taking names for spring positions, Thomas confirms. William might consider it if farm work's not enough. This gentle suggestion that James's son might seek industrial employment would have been unthinkable in previous generations when farms absorbed all available family labour. The Edwardian period marked transition between agricultural self-sufficiency and the mixed rural economy that would eventually dominate, with family members increasingly working both on and off farms to maintain viability. Mary unwraps her special package, revealing several small paper parcels of different sizes. "Got everyone something," she announces, displaying unusual animation after the stimulation of town contact. From the largest package emerges a small bottle of lemon extract, precious flavouring that will transform winter's plain dishes into something special for months to come. For Emma, there's a pencil with coloured lead on each end, blue and red for school drawings. James and William receive peppermint sticks, simple candy that represents luxury in winter's restricted diet. "And seeds," Mary concludes, showing her mother the smallest package. Early lettuce variety the greengrocer recommended for as soon as soil can be worked. These modest treasures, purchased with the proceeds from their market goods, represent careful balance between present pleasure and future investment. The seeds especially embody hope, literal and figurative commitment to another growing season despite winter's current grip. Thomas distributes his own purchases with similar care. Needles for Sarah's mending, a small bottle of liniment for his own winter-aching joints, a replacement file for tool maintenance, and most precious, a newspaper less than a week old. "Thought we'd have something fresh to read evenings," he explains, handling the paper with reverence appropriate to its value as both practical information source and entertainment for the remaining winter weeks. The newspaper will be read aloud by lamplight, each article savoured regardless of content, then passed to neighbouring farms for similar consumption before eventually finding final use as kindling or privy paper. Nothing with potential value is wasted in the winter economy, especially items carrying news from beyond immediate experience. As natural light begins fading toward evening, James and William prepare to depart with their borrowed wool carders. The weather remains stable enough for safe travel to their closer farm, though Thomas confirms his earlier observations about strengthening winds. "Storm coming tomorrow, I'd say," he predicts, drawing on decades of weather pattern recognition. "Might want to secure that loose barn door you mentioned." This casual warning, neighbour to neighbour, might prevent significant property damage or animal loss. Such information sharing functions as informal insurance in communities where formal coverage doesn't exist or remains unaffordable for most. Goodbyes are exchanged with genuine warmth, the brief social contact having nourished something as essential as food for winter-isolated families. James and William promise return of the carders within the week, but the visit's value extends far beyond the practical tool-borrowing that ostensibly motivated it. As the Thatchers disappear down the snowy track toward their own farm, the Wilson family returns to their evening routine with noticeably lighter spirits. The social contact, however brief, has provided psychological sustenance as important as physical nourishment in winter's challenging conditions. "The Coopers are struggling," Sarah tells Thomas as they prepare the evening meal together. "John's back is troubling him again." Thomas nods understanding, immediately shifting mental calculations about the coming week's work. "I'll stop by tomorrow if weather allows, take some of that pork we smoked last month." This immediate, unhesitating response to another family's need isn't extraordinary virtue, but ordinary community functioning. When the Wilsons faced crisis, a difficult birth, illness, or weather damage, similar support would materialize from neighbors without formal request. The system wasn't perfect, but it provided essential safety net where governmental support remained minimal. As darkness settles completely outside, the family gathers around the table for their evening meal, conversation unusually animated after the day's expanded social contact. Emma proudly displays William's carved sheep, Mary recounts market observations, Thomas and Sarah discuss community news gleaned from their respective conversations. In this moment, Winter's isolation recedes slightly, the social bonds of community having temporarily bridged the physical distances that separate farm from farm. Tomorrow may bring renewed storm, further hardship, additional challenges, but tonight they've been reminded they don't face winter entirely alone. Outside, stars appear in gaps between gathering clouds, the promised storm still hours distant. Inside, lamplight creates warm circles of illumination where an Edwardian farm family maintains connections beyond their immediate household, through shared news, through market interactions, through simple neighbourly assistance offered and received without fanfare. This, too, is how they survived winter, not just through physical preparation and practical knowledge, but through the invisible, essential sustenance of human community. The promised storm arrives overnight, but with less ferocity than Thomas predicted. Dawn reveals several inches of fresh snow rather than the feared blizzard, a manageable inconvenience rather than dangerous crisis. There's a subtle change in the quality of light filtering through the cottage windows. Still winter's pallid illumination, but with a hint of strengthening that suggests February's gradual progression toward March. Light's different, Thomas observes as he returns from early morning barn checks, days stretching. Sarah nods understanding, having noticed the same almost imperceptible shift. After months of deep winter darkness, even minor increases in daylight register in the bodies and spirits of those attuned to natural rhythms. It's not spring yet. Far from it, but the first whisper of its eventual arrival has become detectable to experienced senses. Daisy's udder is swelling more, Thomas reports, warming his hands at the kitchen fire. Calf's definitely coming sooner than we thought. Week at most, I'd say. This imminent birth represents both opportunity and challenge. New life bringing future milk production, but requiring additional care during winter's still dangerous grip. The timing is awkward, falling between winter's worst and spring's relief, when resources are most depleted but needs remain high. We should prepare the birthing pen today, Sarah suggests, stirring the morning porridge. I'll check what clean sacking we have for bedding. The day unfolds with this preparation as its focus, the rhythm of regular chores now supplemented by specific arrangements for the coming birth. Thomas and Mary clear a corner of the barn, creating a sheltered space away from drafts but easily accessible for human assistance if needed. Sarah sorts through stored fabric, identifying pieces too worn for household use but still adequate for animal bedding. Remember when Bess carved 2 years back? Mary asks as she helps her father move fresh straw into the birthing area. Snow was so deep you carried the calf to the house in your coat. Thomas nods, the memory vivid. 3 feet of drift against the barn door. Had to dig out with a frying pan because the shovel was buried in the tool shed. These casual recollections of past challenges serve multiple purposes: entertainment during mundane work, reinforcement of family resilience through remembered crisis overcome, and practical education about potential solutions to similar future problems. The Wilson family history is stored not in written records, but in these oral accounts passed between generations through daily conversation. By midday, the birthing area is prepared, clean, draft-free, with extra bedding and room for human intervention if complications arise. Thomas hangs a lantern nearby, ready for quick illumination if labour begins during darkness. These preparations represent not just practical readiness, but psychological comfort, controlling what can be controlled in anticipation of the unpredictable. The afternoon brings another subtle shift in weather, the temperature rising just enough to soften snow on south-facing surfaces, creating occasional drips from the cottage eaves. It's not a true thaw, barely perceptible unless specifically observed, but it signals the weakening of winter's absolute dominion. "Hear that?" Thomas asks Emma as they return from checking rabbit snares in the hedgerow. A distinct liquid patter sounds from the cottage roof, water droplets finding release from frozen imprisonment. Emma nods, her expression brightening at this small promise of change. "Does that mean spring's coming?" "Not just yet." Thomas tempers her enthusiasm gently, "but it's a start. Sun's getting stronger even when we can't feel it much." This careful balance between hope and realism characterizes the late winter mindset, acknowledging positive signs without surrendering to premature optimism that could make the remaining cold weeks seem even longer by contrast. The experienced farmer recognizes these earliest transition markers without overinterpreting their immediate significance. Inside the cottage, Sarah and Mary have begun another form of preparation, seed sorting for the coming growing season. Wooden boxes containing carefully saved seeds from previous harvests are brought from storage, their contents spread across the kitchen table for inventory and viability testing. "Pea seeds still look sound," Sarah observes, examining the dried spheres for signs of mould or insect damage. "Should be enough for 2 full rows, plus some for early picking." The seeds represent both literal and figurative investment in future survival, physical potential for food production and psychological commitment to another growing cycle despite winter's current reality. Their careful preservation and examination embodies the perpetual forward focus that sustained Edwardian farming families through seasonal hardship. Each seed type receives specific attention according to its particular vulnerabilities and importance. Peas and beans, crucial protein sources that also enrich soil, are checked for insect boring that might render them non-viable. Carrot and parsnip seeds, tiny and vulnerable to moisture damage, are gently rolled between fingers to confirm they maintain proper texture rather than clumping, which would indicate damaging exposure to damp. These onion seeds are questionable, Sarah decides, setting aside a small paper packet. We'll test a few before planting the whole lot. The testing process she refers to is simple but effective, placing a few seeds between damp cloth for several days to see if germination occurs. This small investment of limited resources provides insurance against the much larger potential waste of soil preparation, planting time, and growing space if entire crop areas were devoted to non-viable seeds. As Mary helps with the sorting, she absorbs crucial knowledge through both explicit instruction and simple observation, which seeds can last multiple years, which must be acquired fresh, how to recognize quality, optimal storage methods. Like the mechanical skills Thomas teaches, this botanical knowledge represents essential inheritance passing between generations without formal education structures. "The new lettuce seeds you got at market. Shall we try those first?" Sarah asks, indicating the small paper packet purchased days earlier. Mary nods eagerly, the new variety representing experimental opportunity within the otherwise conservative planting strategy. Edwardian farmers balance tradition with innovation carefully, maintaining proven methods that ensured basic survival while cautiously testing improvements that might enhance prosperity. Greengrocer said they stand cold better than regular kinds, Mary explains, might get an earlier harvest. This potential for extending the growing season, even by mere weeks, could significantly improve both nutrition and potential market income. Fresh greens after winter's preserved diet didn't just satisfy taste preferences, but provided vital nutrients increasingly understood as essential for health in the early 20th century. The seed sorting continues throughout the afternoon, a deceptively simple task that embodies complex calculations about family needs, growing conditions, crop rotation requirements, and labor availability. By the time they finish, organized piles represent the coming year's potential, categorized by planting time, growing location, and purpose. "More potatoes this year, I think," Sarah suggests as they return seeds to storage containers. "Last year's crop didn't last as well as hoped." Thomas, who has returned from outdoor chores during their work, nods agreement. "Could expand the patch behind the apple trees. Soil's good there now the trees are bigger." This casual planning conversation represents the earliest stage of the complex choreography that will structure their efforts once weather permits actual cultivation. Like many Edwardian farming discussions, it occurs without paper plans or formal records, yet encompasses sophisticated understanding of soil conditions, sunlight patterns, plant needs, and labor requirements. As twilight approaches, Thomas makes one final check of the animals before darkness falls completely. In the barn, Daisy the cow shows increasing signs of imminent calving, restlessness, swollen udder, the subtle physical changes recognizable to experienced eyes. Thomas lingers longer than usual, ensuring everything is prepared if labor begins overnight. "Think she'll wait till morning?" Mary asks, having accompanied her father for the evening check. Thomas studies the cow thoughtfully. "Hard to say. Animals mostly choose dawn or dusk for birthing when they can, but first-timers like her don't always follow the rules." This uncertainty represents one of countless variables Edwardian farmers contended with daily. The unpredictable biological rhythms that defied even the most careful planning and preparation. Adaptability wasn't just useful, but essential in a lifestyle where control remained partial at best. "I'll check her before bed and once during night," Thomas decides. "You get proper sleep, might need you fresh tomorrow if she's still labouring at dawn." This delegation represents not just practical division of labour, but preparation of the next generation for eventual responsibility. Mary is deemed capable of providing birthing assistance if needed, but her father ensures she'll be adequately rested for what might be physically and emotionally demanding work. Back in the cottage, the evening meal features rabbit from the day's snares, transformed by Sarah's cooking into rich stew that stretches limited meat with potatoes and preserved vegetables. The family eats with appreciation born of direct connection to their food's origins. These aren't anonymous ingredients purchased without context, but resources they've personally grown, raised, hunted, or preserved. "Good catching today," Thomas compliments Emma, who had spotted the promising rabbit runs that guided snare placement. "Your eyes are sharp." The girl accepts the praise with evident pleasure, understanding its significance beyond mere compliment. Her developing observation skills represent valuable contribution to family welfare, her place in the interdependent system becoming increasingly meaningful as she matures. After the meal, the family settles into evening activities around the fire, Thomas reviewing the newspaper acquired at market, reading selected articles aloud, Sarah mending worn clothing with neat economical stitches, Mary practicing knitting a new pair of mittens. Emma drawing with her coloured pencil on scraps of paper saved for this purpose. The newspaper provides rare connection to world beyond their immediate experience, though its week-old news already belongs to a past rapidly receding. Still, the articles offer mental stimulation and conversation topics that relieve winter's psychological confinement, expanding restricted horizons through shared imagination. Says here they're expanding the railway line to Addington by summer, Thomas reports, the information generating more interest than distant political happenings. Local transportation improvements directly affected their ability to market produce or access supplies, making such developments personally relevant in ways national news often wasn't. Will that make getting to market easier? Mary asks, seeing potential practical application immediately. Might do, Thomas acknowledges. Depends on fares. Still needs Samson for getting goods there regardless. This practical assessment, weighing potential benefits against realistic limitations, characterises the Edwardian farmer's approach to modernisation. New technologies and infrastructure weren't rejected outright, but evaluated according to actual utility within existing systems rather than abstract notions of progress. As the evening deepens, conversation gradually shifts to spring planning, seed choices leading naturally to discussion of garden layout, crop rotation, potential improvements to last year's arrangements. This forward-looking talk serves as psychological bridge across remaining winter weeks, creating purposeful anticipation that makes current limitations more bearable. If we try the new potatoes in the far corner, Thomas suggests, mentally mapping the vegetable garden, we can put peas where potatoes were last year, good rotation for soil. This understanding of crop rotation, alternating plant families to maintain soil fertility and reduce pest problems, represented sophisticated agricultural knowledge developed through generations of observation and experience. Long before scientific explanation of nitrogen fixation or pest life cycles, farmers recognized these patterns and developed systems to work with natural processes rather than against them. I want to try more flowers this year, Emma contributes unexpectedly, looking up from her drawing. Mrs. Thatcher says they bring more bees for the vegetables. Thomas nods approval at this observation. She's right. Good thinking. We'll find space along the garden edges. This casual affirmation of a child's contribution illustrates the gradual integration of younger family members into decision-making processes, not through formal declaration of authority, but through recognition of useful ideas regardless of source. Emma beams at having her suggestion taken seriously, understanding instinctively that such inclusion represents growth toward adult standing in the family system. As night settles fully outside, Thomas prepares for one final barn check before sleep. The temperature has dropped again with darkness, the brief daytime softening already reclaimed by freezing cold. He dresses in outdoor layers, lights a lantern, and moves toward the door. "Wake me if she started," Sarah requests, knowing he'll check Daisy's condition. "I'll have water heating." This simple exchange encapsulates their partnership's efficient communication. No need to specify which animal, what potential event, or why water might be needed. Years of shared experience create shorthand understanding that requires minimal, explicit direction, even in potentially complex situations. Thomas returns 20 minutes later, snow crusting his boots and coating his shoulders. "Nothing yet," he reports, "but she's restless, likely tonight or tomorrow." The family begins preparations for sleep, banking the fire carefully to maintain minimal warmth overnight while conserving precious fuel. Hot water bottles are filled for beds, extra blankets distributed, oil lamps extinguished except for one kept ready for potential midnight barn visits. Despite the continuing winter conditions outside, there's subtle shift in the cottage atmosphere this evening, a barely perceptible lightening that has nothing to do with physical illumination, but rather with psychological orientation. The seed sorting, the planning conversations, the imminent calf birth all represent transition from winter's pure survival focus towards spring's generative potential. "I've been thinking," Thomas says unexpectedly as the family prepares to disperse to cold bedrooms, "we should consider trying that new fodder crop the agricultural bulletin mentioned, the one that grows faster after late frosts." This willingness to experiment, to allocate precious resources toward unproven innovation, signals confidence that transcends immediate circumstances. He's looking beyond remaining winter weeks toward longer horizons, the seasonal vision extending past current limitations, toward expanding possibilities. "Worth trying on a small patch," Sarah agrees, practical as always while still supporting forward momentum, perhaps where the turnips failed last year. This balance between innovation and caution, between opportunity and security, characterized successful Edwardian farming. Those who clung exclusively to tradition might maintain stability, but miss crucial advantages. Those who embraced every new idea risked essential security for uncertain benefits. The sustainable path navigated between these extremes, incorporating change selectively within proven frameworks. As family members move toward their respective sleeping spaces, Emma pauses at the window, peering into darkness briefly before drawing the curtain. "I saw a star," she reports with mild surprise. "Skies clearing." This simple observation carries meteorological significance. Clear skies generally bring colder temperatures, but also indicate storm systems have passed. More importantly, it represents connection to natural cycles larger than immediate circumstances, perspective that extends beyond current conditions toward broader patterns and eventual change. Upstairs in the cold bedrooms, family members burrow under multiple blankets, bodies curling instinctively to preserve warmth while hot water bottles provide temporary comfort soon surrendered to winter's persistent chill. Despite physical discomfort, there's subtle shift in their collective orientation. Not quite optimism, but perhaps resilience strengthened by accumulated survival and emergent anticipation. The calf will come when it's ready, regardless of human preference. Seeds will wait patiently for soil warm enough to support germination. Winter will retain its grip for weeks yet before reluctantly yielding to spring's inevitable advance. But the cyclical knowledge embedded in generations of farming experience provides context that transcends immediate conditions. This too shall pass, as it always has before. Outside, stars glitter in clearing skies, their ancient light connecting this Edwardian moment to timeless natural rhythms. Inside, a farming family sleeps, their bodies resting, while minds process the day's information and prepare for tomorrow's challenges. They inhabit the liminal space between winter and spring, between endurance and anticipation, between the seasons that structure agricultural existence. The Edwardian farmer's winter survival depended on physical preparation, practical knowledge, community connection, and psychological resilience. As the Wilson family sleeps, all these elements remain active in their unconscious processing, seeds sorting themselves in dreams, animals requiring care in imagined scenarios, neighbours appearing in nocturnal narratives, future gardens taking shape in sleeping minds. This is how they survived winter, not just through daylight struggles against cold and scarcity, but through night's integration of experience into understanding, challenges into capabilities, endurance into identity. When they wake tomorrow to face whatever weather arrives, they'll carry this processed resilience into another day of Edwardian farming life, one day closer to spring, one day stronger in their collective capacity to thrive in partnership with the natural world that both challenges and sustains them. And with that, close your eyes and drift off to sleep.